Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Niko leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
And Portland can't say shit.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take the Open Cup seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Today is Friday. We are back at Long Acres with Niko Moreno doing what we learned this week. This is going to be a little bit of a brief segment. We have an interview with Wade Weber at the back end of the show, but we do want to make sure to get on the record and talk a little bit about this pretty massive faceplant against the Rapids. Now, they of course got the point. They got a point, but this is a game they led 3-0 at home. They opened the second half with a third goal after playing pretty solid in the first half to go up 2-0. A little fortuitous, but the third goal really well taken. And then the game just completely falls apart almost immediately after the goal. I believe it was actually the next possession after the goal that the Sounders get called for a penalty. And then literally the next possession after that, they get called for a second penalty. It's 3-2. Game is sort of, at that point, the game plan is out the window. But still, you want to see them hold on at 3-2. What did you make of this whole performance?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on as always, Jeremiah. Thank you to the audience for listening. And yes, look, I thought it was another inconsistent performance by the Seattle Sounders, and an inconsistent way that is kind of turning into a pattern, and in which, you know, there are good things about it, right? I think that Brian Smetzer has emphasized on being on the front foot and having intensity early and doing a lot of right things right off the bat, and that has worked out well. But then beyond that point, game management has been difficulty in this one. And I know that maybe Brian doesn't quite agree with it, but because I asked him today, what would you have done different going and looking into the tape? And he kind of mentioned just Ferreira. And although I thought Ferreira had a good game, and he thought that maybe he could have left him out a little bit longer, I continue to believe that a lot of what went wrong in the second half was the fact that your two biggest components in Obed and Christian looked like guys that played every minute of every game, specifically Christian, who had a couple of unlikely,
uncharacteristic
mistakes.
Yeah, he had the penalty, and then he whiffed on the tackle that led to the second goal. Or not the second goal, the third goal.
I think those are part of exhaustion. So I thought that Brian...
and he had picked up a yellow card earlier in the game that is also sort of unlike him. Like, he's a pretty clean player, and I think part of why he went in soft on that tackle is because he's aware that he's on a yellow card. Now, maybe he's also on his mind, we've already been called for 2 penalties, we want to get called for a third. But either way, you can't just let a Darren Yappy dribble through the box like he did. And it was just and I went back and watched the game, and I will say that I thought that they managed it a little better than my initial watch. Like, they definitely were still pushing forward. Now, one thing they did seem to do is right after the second goal, they got beat on a press. And I believe it's Reggie Cannon ends up getting a shot off. That's a very dangerous shot. Andy Thomas makes a great save, but the press really got cut up on that sequence, and that was almost right. I think it might have been like the sequence right after the second goal, and the Sounders did not press as forcefully from that point forward. But they did do a pretty good job, I thought, of moving the ball on their own end. They created some chances. They didn't get off any shots between like the 57th minute and the 89th minute. That's a problem. But it wasn't as they weren't stuck back in their end as much as in my mind. I thought that they were. Like Jordan Morris had a decent little look. They had a couple cutbacks that were dangerous cutbacks, but there were good defensive plays. But just in general, the Sounders have now led 3-0 in 2 consecutive games and then been forced to just hold on for dear life at that point when they should be able to manage those situations. Like Albert Rusnak said this in the postgame, I don't care if we're down to 6 or 7 guys, we got to be able to see out a 3-0 lead.
Exactly. And I think you have to be ready for it. So if the whole point of this new way to approach games is to get an early lead and have intensity, then you have to be ready for what's next, which is a team giving you everything they got, pushing numbers forward. How do we handle it? How do we protect ourselves with the ball? And how do we respond to tired legs? And how do we respond to adjustments by the opposite coach? And this is something that I've kind of focused on a lot because I thought that there was a lot of adjustments that Kansas City made in that game from the first half to the second half.
Yeah.
They went to a 4-4-2. They pushed and Bede a lot more on that side. That made a lot of problems for Seattle. And in this one, I think that when you look at the substitution pattern, Chris Arnold is trying to regain the midfield. He brings attention in the 62nd. And although Brian Spencer said he made 5 substitutions in this one, the first 2 was Yeimar, which was already limited minutes, right. Just him. The other one is Jordan Morris, who comes in, but
both were very much planned subs.
Planned subs, exactly. And then the other 2 end up being in the 79th minute.
The other 3,
all too late, in my opinion, for Ryan Kinn and Pedro Vega to come in and perform and try to get back. So I thought that they needed to be fresher legs on the midfield. And this is the point that I want to make. I know that we're on a short time schedule today, but needs to be more done about what Brian wants to do, to look at his bench and say, who can give me some Christian minutes? And when I was looking at the game and I was looking at that bench, I was thinking either you're bringing Kalani to play center midfield or you're bringing Kalani to play Alex's role, and you put in Alex a little bit higher if the plan is to leave Alex on the field, because you just needed somebody else to prevent Christian Roldan from being exposed to it.
Yeah, and he did sort of allude to 2 things today that I thought were interesting. One was the way he talked about the subs in the 79th minute. He made it to me sound like he was his plan was to bring in Reed for John Bell and Pedro for Rothrock, and that he had kind of wished he had left Ferreira on. I thought that was kind of interesting because it, first of all, alluded to the possibility of bringing Pedro in on the left. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe he was planning on moving Jesus over to the left if he hadn't brought in Kent. But I guess I wish we dug in on that a little bit more, because he thought Jesus is playing well and he decided to pull him off. And Kent did not. I thought Kent had one of his least effective games, actually. He looked really ineffective in this game. I don't know. For 10 minutes. It's always tough or 20 minutes, I guess, with stoppage time. It's always tough. But then the other thing that I thought was interesting was he said that he was hoping to get one or both of Christian and Obed off the field, but because of the game state, he left them on, which just feels a little off, because at some point you are reinforcing this. Like, you're going to need Danny Leyva at some point in this season, whether it's this week or next week or the week after. At some point, Danny Leyva is going to need to play some minutes.
Preach.
And he is repeatedly choosing not to give him those minutes, not to give him like he did play against Kansas City, but he ended up playing as more of a 10 in that game. He came off for Albert. He came on for Albert, who they were at that point just trying to hold the lead. And I just think it's a little bit of a miss. And I'll give Brian a lot of credit. I actually looked into this today. The Sounders use just about as many subs as anyone else, and they play them for longer. that's somewhat affected by injuries, but I think the idea that he does not use his subs, I think, is sometimes overstated. But specifically the way he's using subs in the center mid, I think he is mismanaging that rotation right now.
And I think it goes beyond that because I totally agree with you. That was something that I felt like needed to be done. Danny Leyva is a guy that needs some competitive minutes, needs some confidence. You even talk about confidence so many times when it comes to a guy that's just sitting on the bench. And sometimes you have to do that. I'll even give it to Ryan Kent. Look, Ryan Kent coming in, his body language overall, and I've said this consistently, he's a guy that seems frustrated, and not just with himself, but it's also with everything else that's surrounding him. There is a pass that him and Reed doesn't really see eye to eye. On that left side, he's kind of waiting on Reed to make a move. He puts it ahead, Reed doesn't see it, he goes out of bounds. Right. I think that, to your point, sometimes Brian, and I'll never be a Brian person, I've said this a bunch of times, but I do, because he's the coach, he's the main coach, he's one of the best in MLS. But as someone who feels confident enough that he knows the intricacies of his team, what's going on, following it as long as I have, I do feel like sometimes Brian will seek out results and won't see the overall potential in the longer term.
That he gets so focused on getting the result today that he loses sight of what a sacrifice today could mean for tomorrow.
Exactly, because look, when I look at Pedro and I look at Brian Kent, those are guys that you need to be forcefully trying to see what else they can provide because they need that confidence because they have a top ceiling level of talent that is unlike anything you have on the field. And although Paul Rothrock absolutely has earned every single minute and has looked so effective and so good, and I love the kid, you also have to make sure that those other guys,
they have
Paul to the same point, he'll come in any time, doesn't matter what, and will give you the exact same product. With those other two guys, you might need to work at it a little bit. You might have to, nurture it a little bit more. And those are things that sometimes Brian doesn't quite do.
Yeah, and I would just say that there's so much talent on the wings, so much raw. They have a lot of talent on the wings, and that includes Paul Rothrock. That includes Jesus. That includes Georgie Manungu, who can't get on the field at all right now. They have a lot. They have depth, and they have real talent on the wings. And I think that Brian is a little too focused on who's winning the most minutes. That's who's going to get the starts. And it's sort of, and I just think he can do a little bit better job of spreading that around and building up everyone's confidence. And I'll say on the same level, Reed and Danny, not on the same level, on a rung down, I think, and Kalani to that matter. All three of those players, I think you need to just get them on the field and get them rotated. This is a deep team. I'll say it. It's not as deep in certain areas. It's not the same level of depth across every position, but there is depth here. I think he could use it a little bit more. And I guess that's maybe a good transition into the San Jose game, where it looks like there will be some rotation. Maybe not at the spots that we expect it to be, but there will be some rotation.
There will be. And this goes back to what we're saying, right? I mean, easier said than done. And that I have no doubt. He gets, a week to make decisions, and then we beat it with a whole 4 months, right? But at the same time, I do feel like they're like this particular game, and I kind of said it for Wednesday that I thought it was going to be Pedro and Kent. It wasn't that.
It was not. I thought the same thing.
And in this one, I thought, okay, then maybe this is it. And I don't know if it will be. So to that effect, look, I know that Ferreira has been good, and you are building up his confidence as well. He's finally adapting, and I really like how cerebral he is and how good he's at the
great run, by the way, that he made. He didn't have the finish that he would have wanted, but he did. It was a really, really good run. He runs past that center back. He only has one touch to control it. It's not the best touch. He ends up having to sort of like poke it with his right foot instead of really lash it with his left, which I think is probably what he would have liked to have done. He does put it on frame. The ball falls to Danny Wasowski, who you really think needs to at least put that on frame. He did not put it anywhere close to frame. But there were moments that, and Ferreira, what he's done really over the last month or so is put himself into dangerous positions. That is something that he was not doing earlier in the season. This is a huge step forward for him to just be getting into those spots. He's starting to get goals, starting to get assists. I like a lot what he's doing, but you're right. He's not unbenchable either.
Exactly. And especially in a San Jose game that, look, this is a good team offensively, but defensively, they might be able to give you some gaps. This might be a game where a guy like Ryan King gets going, and it doesn't look like he's going to be starting. So those are some of the things that going into this game are interesting. Obviously, him and Bruce Arena have this huge relationship. He's going to want to win this
you're
game.
saying?
There's Brian and Bruce have this good relationship. Two of the oldest coaches. He just talked about it. So he's going to want to win this game, and therefore I think that he always needs some of those pieces that make him feel at ease, and that's where that overall potential of the team kind of takes a hit sometimes.
Yeah. What do you expect from San Jose? They're in a little bit of a slump right now, but this year they have been one of the, if not the highest scoring teams, certainly one of the highest scoring teams. They give up a lot on the back end, though. In the first meeting this year, the Sounders went down 1-0 and then dominated the rest of the game, the last 80 minutes or so of that game, and ended up having to settle for a 1-1 tie, but not from lack of chances. This game could be pretty wide open. Although what's frustrating is that this had the potential to be look, if we can get a point from this game, we'd be reasonably satisfied. It's kind of a must-win now.
It is. And, yeah, they are tied for third as far as I can see in
goals scored.
No, hold on a second. Oh, no, yeah, they're tied with Miami at 44.
For the most goals scored.
For the most goals scored. And, you said it best.
Second to San Diego, 46.
Oh, San Diego's.
Yeah.
Imagine that. So this team has been very interesting to see and watch because he doesn't look, he doesn't move, he doesn't play like a Bruce Arena team. I don't know if I'm alone in this, but the 3-man back line, how far he gets his highs up, the ability for Christian Espinosa to at times play the wing back. At times he, cuts inside and he's a little bit higher up the field. But Christian Arango and Martinez, a very experienced guy, well beyond his years, but a guy that still has a lot of hunger and still has a lot of talent. It's really great to see. And Christian Arango, experienced guy, not as old, obviously, in terms of years, but a guy that's been around all over the league, all over the Colombian League, Liga MX. He's been in Europe. He is in MLS. He's a goal scorer, a true goal scorer. So this is going to be a really big challenge for a defensive team that won't count with Jackson Reagan, who will be out because of accumulation of yellows. And now it's likely going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be Jay Bell and Neymar.
Yeah.
You're not going to put Kim. You're going to put two guys that you might have to substitute out.
Yeah.
So it's going to be Jay Bell and Gamer Gomez Andrade. We'll see how that works out. And this is probably another team that you want to be experimenting things on. I know that they've played together before.
They have played. They weren't. I feel like they've had some rough moments, in part because neither one of them really likes to be the main focal point of building out.
Yep.
And so in that way, they're going to need a little bit more help in the build out than I think that they would like. Obviously, Jackson is usually the main guy back there. I still don't quite understand how he got himself a yellow. It looked like everyone was pretty confused on how he got himself a yellow. We don't need to get into that.
Terrible referee.
It was very poorly refereed, especially in the second half. And I think the penalty calls were correct for them. I don't have an huge issue with the penalty calls, but there was a lot of game management stuff that I think he botched pretty badly. So I don't know. Hopefully they can turn around. We should touch on one more thing before we get out of here, and that's the whole Nouhou situation. We found out officially he's been suspended for 2 total games, not 2 additional games, which I was shocked by. I thought for sure it was going to be 1 mandatory and 2 additional. He only got 1 additional game, so he'll be out for this week. And from the sound of it, Brian is sort of welcoming him back into the team. I don't know if he'll start against Atlanta, but it sounds like he'll at least be available against Atlanta. And I don't quite know what to make of it. I feel like those of us on the outside are more concerned about his behavior than, like, Brian seems to be concerned, but he also seems much more focused on, look, he's still our best left back. And on some level, I just don't know if that's the right message.
That's what I've been saying all week long, is the fact that, and even to Brian himself, I told him, is it about maturity or is this just new? This is just what you get with Nouhou, is you got to take the good with the bad, where, as a player, just like many in sports, where they're very talented at what they do, but there's always going to be some bad that comes with it. And, you talk about all kinds of players in basketball, Draymond Green and Ron Artest and Terrell Owens and Pepe, for Real Madrid, Sergio Ramos. There are those guys that are very good, they're very talented, but then there's always some extra stuff.
Yeah.
And to that, look, I've heard that Sandro Hart has been very, critical of Nouhou, and at times, it feels like it's something about just Nouhou personally, but I feel like there is a lot of fair criticism that is being done, and I feel like it's not about Nouhou the person.
Nouhou the person is a great guy. He seems like a fun person.
Fun dude, exactly. But there is a level of expectation when it comes to something like being able to take a middle finger in the middle of a game and being part of the role. And look, I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm an impulsive guy, but if it's at work and it's somebody that I'm dealing with at work, I'm probably not going to let the street come out of Niko.
Well, I think that's what's the most bizarre thing about that incident is that he wasn't even that worked up when he's talking to the ref. The whole flip off thing. I think I read that as totally innocent, not smart, relatively innocent. I don't think he was flipping off the ref. I think he was demonstrating what happened. But you just look at his demeanor, and it's not someone who is out of his mind, frustrated. He's just like, no, they were mean to me, and I did something mean to them. That's the way this works. And it's like, no, that isn't how it works. And I think what concerns me about Nouhou, take all whether or not you think he's a great player or not, what concerns me about him is that you just don't, it feels like you can't trust him to not make mental mistakes. And that is, to me, a killer. That's where you go, look, I don't know what's going to set him off. Maybe it's a guy giving him a little shove. Maybe it's a fan flipping him off. Maybe it's a call not going his way. I need to be able to trust that you can manage your emotions in a way that are not going to get the team in trouble. And he keeps, and I asked Brian this, I was like, he does keep putting the team in bad positions this way. And you seem to be sort of blowing it off. And he's like, well, it's not important for me. It's important for my team, for the teammates to trust him. I don't know. I mean, and maybe they do. I don't know. But it just doesn't seem like it's matching up to me.
And this is part of the shared culpability that I want to bring up on the table. Obviously, this is a pattern, and we know who Nouhou is. We've known him since Sounders 2 with Ezra Henderson. I mean, we know who he is and kind of a little bit of that extraness that comes with it. And the Sounders, including Brian Smetzer, similar to what he just said to us, it's kind of felt like the way they dealt with him. So he need to be. What have they really done to change that or help him mature a little bit more?
They've benched him for games when he misses a flight or misses a meeting, or like but they've never really come down hard on him.
And that's why I don't know. The real line is drawn by what have you done for me lately? What are you doing for the team? And I think that because his season has had struggles and his season hasn't been as good as it's been in other times and other seasons, perhaps that's why maybe we're having some certain things. But at the end of the day, Brian Spencer and the Seattle Sounders need to have a real better talk with Nouhou to figure out what it is that you move on forward from this. And if he's the guy or not. And another thing that I want to bring up is the fact that he's always been treated like that guy, like what we just said, right? He's the best defender we have. And you brought a whole bunch of left backs that have not been able to take the position from Nouhou because that's how good he is. So you got to give him that. Brad Smith, Jovan Jones, Waylon Francis, a whole bunch of players that you've brought on that side, and Nouhou has outperformed all of them.
Dylan Remick.
That's why now we're pushing back. So that's why you deal with the extra stuff. The problem now is that you're becoming a real big liability, and how do you change that pattern so it doesn't affect you?
Yeah. Well, I don't have a good answer for it. I only hope that this is the last time we have to talk about it. And hopefully in the future, he's just on better behavior and he's just goes back to his defending ways. But with all that, we should probably get out of here. Unfortunately, I have other stuff to do today. We do have a second part of the show. I interviewed Wade Weber about this 1995 team that is being honored on Saturday before the game. They're the first professional title that the Sounders ever won, 1995 A-League. And we had a good conversation. Hopefully you enjoy it. But with all that said, I am Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Niko Moreno, who you can find on Pulso Sports, Blue Sky El Rolo NW, and of course on Soccer Down Here and Lobbing Scorchers. I am Jeremiah Shan. This is No Sadietes, part of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes No Sadietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening. No Sadietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Haxon Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Haxon Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at haxonferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to haxonferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Haxon Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes. I'm Jeremiah Shan, and joining me today, we're doing a retrospective on the 1995 A-League Sounders to honor this week of throwback. Is Wade Weber. Welcome back to the show. I think you might be our most frequent guest at this point.
Well, I'm honored and actually really excited to share what's left in the memory bank about the 90s. The further away I get from it, the dimmer it becomes.
We can strike with the iron.
Yeah.
Well, the iron is cooling. But yeah, so in case you don't know, Wade was on that 95 team. He played in 95 and 96, right?
And 94.
And 94. Oh, okay. So you were all three of those seasons. Okay. And then you went on to have an MLS, a relatively short, but an MLS career. And then you got into teaching and then came back to the Sounders eventually.
Yes, it is a circuitous route. Don McLean in his song Crossroads says, "All roads lead to where I stand." And I would not have mapped out the trajectory that led me to my current role, but I walked all those steps. Yes, I did.
So you've now been with the Sounders for 10 years?
It'll be 10 years in March of next year.
Okay.
Well, actually, February 29th. I joined on a leap year, so maybe I've only been with them for 2 years. Yeah.
And in case you hear what's going on in the background, we are recording in one of the Sounders radio booths, but we are being serenaded by a soundtrack that apparently KXP put together and is blasting over the PA while we...
I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Right up my alley.
Yeah, so it's a very 95-centric playlist, I assume. Maybe it has some pre-95 stuff in it too, but I'm going to trust that it's a lot of 95 stuff, which I'll use as a weird transition into talking about this 95 team, which is a team that we don't get to talk about a lot. It was in the A-League, which is a precursor. It's a precursor to the USL, but it predates MLS.
Yes.
And I didn't really realize this, but you were telling me, off air, that the A-League was actually originally sort of bidding to become the first division of American soccer, and they got a head start. They had a 2-year head start on MLS.
Yeah, part of the conditions of the U.S. being awarded the World Cup in 1994 was that there needed to be a legitimate first division in place, and at the time there were competing leagues. I mean, the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, it was alphabet soup of Western Soccer Alliance, American Professional Soccer League. There was an American Soccer League, not the original from the 30s, the resurrected one, almost exclusively East Coast teams. And I had played in a few of those iterations. You know, I was in the Western Soccer Alliance. I played in the APSL, but the awarding of the World Cup was the kind of kickstart for just kind of an arms race. You know, people saying we have to be in line first, so that FIFA and the U.S. Soccer Federation can designate us as the first division in the United States. And we had maybe 7 teams that first year. 7 teams is not a national league. One of them was in Toronto, and we had the Vancouver 86ers. So really, there were 2 Canadian teams in this. In this league, but you know, flung across the country, and for a couple of years, for about 18 months, we were vying and spending money like first division American team in the 90s, organization in the 90s should be spending. It didn't work out. I mean, Major League Soccer had bigger investors. The plan was entirely different. There was a single entity. What wound up being Major League Soccer, which was not even named yet. They didn't have a name for it, but that won out. And I think historically, it's good that it did, because the individual ownership model, which is really what it happens in the USL now, it's what happened in the NASL back in the day. You definitely have the haves and the have-nots. There's no collective success. It is individual success and a lot of failure. And you need a lot of teams to make a league.
And you look at MLS over we're celebrating essentially the 30th season of MLS this year, right? No, that's not right.
It is the 30th season.
It is the 30th season, okay. And there's been remarkable stability. You know, there's been 3 teams that have been contracted in the history of the league, and we're now sitting at 30 teams in this league. It's been almost all growth, especially for the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, I think since, you could argue since the Toronto RSL entries in the mid-noughties, is that what we call the first decade?
I like that. I'm not...
N-A-U-G-H-T-I-U.
Yeah, no, I got it.
Yeah. I think that might be what the English call it. I'm revealing an Anglophile streak. I think that was the turning point, because there were only like 3 owners in the first few years of the new millennium, and that, you know, I have such a vivid memory of the original Sounders dying. I was 16 years old. They were my team, and they were no more. And it's like the indoor thing died, and that for a while was kind of big. The Tacoma Stars were getting big crowds. So I was used to leagues dying. Right. And then I played in MLS, and I'm seeing teams contracting and this and that. And I thought, wow, I have no faith that this league can last long term. It's interesting who convinced me otherwise, and it was Garth Lagerwey. I brought that to him. He was GM in Salt Lake. We were friends. I was not yet working for the Sounders. He came to visit on his way to Alaska, because he'd never been to Alaska. So he crashed on our couch for a few days. And he said, no, you don't understand. The money in the ownership groups is so much different, and the model and the way that the collective invests in the league is just so different from anything that's ever been attempted in America for soccer. And he said it's going to work. Trust me. And he's a smart guy.
Wow,
Garth's a smart guy.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of Garth Lagerwey stories, and I don't think I've ever heard that one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, going back to '95, I didn't realize this either, that that early iteration of the Sounders, the '94-'96 Sounders, was actually a pretty well invested outfit, and relative speaking to what was going on, and it had it. And there was like there is a legitimate alternate history where the Sounders end up getting into MLS, right? Well, not the Sounders, but a Seattle team gets into MLS.
A Seattle entry into MLS. We in the beginning, it was, the A-League was trying to be the first division, but we also independently, the Sounders would not have been opposed to jumping from that league into this new league. But yeah, I'm not uncomfortable talking about compensation and things. My first professional contract, I got $1,000 a month for 6 months. So yeah, some pro, and then so I started teaching because I had a family. We had a son. I needed a proper job, and soccer, I've used that soccer was like a mistress, but they wouldn't commit to you, so again, I don't know that that's the right analogy, but it was this thing that, man, I wish I could make a go of this. I wish I could make this work, but it just, you're living a nomadic existence. You're playing indoor in the winter, outdoor in the summer. You're scraping together money. You're doing camps and clinics, and it was not professional in the sense that I needed it to be when I was a teacher. So I was making $3,000 a month as a high school history teacher, and my first Seattle Sounders contract was $3,000 a month. They paid insurance, the things I needed to make that work for me. So I made the jump. It wasn't a difficult. I was 27. I was 27. I thought the ship had sailed, but I'd kept fit enough, apparently. And I joined that team in 94, and there were a lot. My salary was not, I wasn't the highest paid player on the team.
Who was?
So, it probably was Peter Hattrip in that first year, because he was coming off some reasonable success. We had Hanneman was a rookie, the Dunn brothers were rookies, Jason Farrell. These kids are all just out of college. But we also had guys who had families, and they, like Billy Crook, Neil Megson, Chance Fry, they weren't gonna give up what they were doing, construction business, whatever it was, just to. And one thing about that era that I think it's more innocent. You didn't have youth soccer. Did not have the pay to play model that you have now. It was still volunteer dads, moms and dads that were out coaching kids, and that the pay to play where coaches are making, youth soccer coaches in the area are making six figures routinely.
Yeah, I just found this out kind of recently.
Yeah,
you can make a pretty good living being a youth soccer coach.
Yep. And now you work every night, and your weekends are. You're everywhere. You're driving all over the state.
You get parents, and
so it's not quite the same, but that didn't exist. So people had to get real jobs, not some soccer affiliated thing. And there were a couple of guys that maybe had made a go of that. Dick McCormick, who will be here on Saturday for the 30th anniversary thing. I love Dick, and I played with him a long time. But he did that indoor-outdoor. He would play. Well, there was no outdoor for a while, so he would play indoor, and then in the summertime he'd do whatever he could. You work camps, you get a day job. You're trying to make it as long as you can. And most guys had a time limit. You're like, guys, I'm 25. I can't keep doing this. I had sort of past that point. I was rescued by a phone call saying the Sounders are coming back, because I really didn't think I was going to continue playing. Teaching was fun. I was a high school teacher and coach. But yeah, the team in 94 and 95 were well paid. Our bonus structure, again, the money in modern, in 2025 terms, might seem minimal, but you win a game, everyone that played gets $100. You win a second game in a row, you get $200. You win a third game in a row, you get $300. It capped at $300, but we had a 5 and a 7 game winning streak in the 94 season. So 7 game winning streak, you're getting a lot of extra $300 little bonuses on top of everything else. So once Major League Soccer happened in 96, if you could go, you went. and you
So it
went
was
to
a real
MLS.
change
Yeah,
from-
they cut salaries. It suddenly became what the USL is.
And did that happen in 96 or that happened after the 96 season?
At the end of the 95 season.
At the end of the 90s. So there's 2 years of it being feeling like a big. What were the crowds like in those early?
Oh, the 94 season, we only sold out Memorial once. But we sold out, which at the time was 12,000.
Did they have the seats in the ends then?
No.
Oh, okay.
No seats on the ends, bench seating, very uncomfortable. The locker room still smelled like the Pelé locker rooms from 75. I mean, it's interesting. Pelé did play in that stadium in 1975. So 20 years later, here we are, the 95 season. But by 95, the crowds had shrunk. We're probably averaging 4,000 to 5,000 a game. No one was making money. The ownership was not. They were paying us a lot. We were not getting big crowds. Sponsorship was. I mean, we did have the jersey sponsor. I think in '95 was Microsoft on the front. Our owner at the time, Scott Oakey, came from Microsoft, so he might have just been investing in his own thing, a little Man City, where you get sponsorship on the corner flags. Yeah. But crowds were boisterous. It's interesting. I talk to people now who went to those games, and I think about that. I was in my late 20s, and there were people there that were in there that had kids, and so they're in their 30s and 40s, and that's 30 years ago now. So these are
older people,
and they're still coming.
Right.
They're here at Lumen. It's exciting that they're still around, but the memory of me is almost exclusively about my hair.
Right. Yes. Famously purple.
I did purple and white and red, and
you had a few different.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
White was the base color that I would move from. You can easily change white. It's hard to make brown purple.
Sure.
But yeah, I started at every game I was healthy, so I was a regular. I wasn't just the funny hair guy. But I say that like I'm bitter. I'm not. I'm glad I'm known for something.
I mean, absolutely one of the iconic images of that era is you in that shirt that is inspired this one with a matching hair color.
Yeah. There's been some call in the office. Somebody reached out today and on Slack and said,
"What about doing the hair?"
And said, "Hey, I think it's time for you to bring the hair back." I'm like, "That's Jackson Reagan's responsibility. I've done my work in that field." Yeah. If Jackson wants advice on hair care products, I can share.
So, you look at this roster from 95, and it is a lot. It's like I don't know how many famous people are on it, but there's a lot. I mean, Marcus is, I would say, became a legitimate star, but there's a lot of recognizable names if you are involved in the soccer scene here. I mean, almost like up and down the roster, there are guys who became coaches or started camps or were involved. Ran clubs. A lot of names that became really bedrock elements of the Seattle soccer community that I do think differentiates it from a lot of the markets around the country.
Yeah. Chance Fry, who was our leading scorer, I think that year, Hattrip would have had more goals and assists, more goal contributions. Peter was unbelievable that season, almost unplayable. I've never had a season with a guy outside of maybe Alon Suter for Dallas in '97, where you give the ball to him and just get out of the way. He was that unstoppable, and he'll tell you about it too.
I bet.
Pete, I love him to pieces, but he does not lack for confidence. Which that's the reality of a goal scorer, right?
I played a couple media games with him, and he's still got it a little bit.
Oh no, Pete was amazing, but Pete heavily involved in coaching. Chance ran East Side for a long time, East Side FC. Even the coaching staff, if you look at the coaching staff, it was Tony Chersky, the old Sounders goalkeeper, was our goalkeeper coach, and his son Alex Chersky is a big wig at Seattle United. Tommy Jenkins, again Sounders legend from the 70s. Tommy was one of our assistant coaches. Frank Barton was one of our assistant coaches. We had this mix of just these old English pros combined with a veteran group. I think that's another thing is I mentioned some college guys like the Dunn brothers and Hanneman and Jason Farrell, but we also had Neil Megson and Bill Crook and Dave Hagen, Dick McCormick, guys who'd been around the block. I was 27. I was not a right out of college kid. So we were veteran enough that when we went to Montreal or went to Atlanta, New York, there weren't a lot of places. The Colorado Foxes, that we'd go there, and we were every bit as veteran as some of these, international lineups that we were facing. I mean, some teams brought in their talent from outside. The base of that team was local. They're born and raised here, in some cases never left. They might have gone for soccer, but they all came home.
That is another thing that's sort of, to me, always been sort of remarkable about the Seattle scene here is that you had this group of players who became pros at young ages when that was not normally. We went through a long stretch of American soccer where there were just not pros between 18 and 22.
Yeah, they were in college. Right. And so I think it's interesting. The original Sounders, they get maybe the famous names, the Alan Hudson, with Jeff Hurst played in 1976. Mike England was maybe our best player in terms of international profile. But they signed Jimmy McAllister out of high school, Jeff Stock, Mark Peterson, Brian Schmetzer, Billy Crook, Tim Bartrow, Craig Nicholson. I'm going deep, but they signed Tony Crudo. All these guys never went to college. They signed directly to a pro team at 18 years old and started training with the pros, which, most of those guys had college scholarship offers, and their parents, Chance Fry's one more. Chance never went to college. He had a scholarship offer. He's still a close friend, and that life of like, I'm in it, I am doing it, and then I think for Chance he was 19 when the league folded. And so what am I going to do? He's any chance of playing in college is gone because you've been paid. He can still go to college if he wants, but again, it's like this notion that if you want to be a professional soccer player, why are you taking an intro to philosophy 100 class? If that's your ambition, you need to be on the field, and you need to be in the gym, and you need to be doing the pro soccer things. I took the other route. I did go to college, and I wouldn't have changed my path, but I didn't have the option either. The Sounders were already gone. The local team was gone. But those guys, I don't think that happened in a lot of other places.
It doesn't seem like it. I don't know.
You look at the 1990. I said this off air, but the 1990 World Cup team, which was the first time we got to the World Cup in my lifetime. We went 40 years. 1950, where we shockingly beat England 1-0, and then 40 years later, 1990, we qualify on the Paul Caligiuri goal down in Trinidad. The oldest guy on that team is 27. Not a single player on that roster played in the North American Soccer League, but every one of them were influenced by it. Their ages range from 19 to 27, and it's that no Billy Crook, no Schmetzer, because those guys were busy playing indoor. They had jobs and livings to make, and U.S. Soccer wasn't giving them any big money to play in this tournament, so they went with college guys. Every one of that team is like a college product, and we lost all 3 games, and only one badly though to Czechoslovakia. We lost 5-1. But
it's I don't know. It's sometimes it's hard to square the circle of how we made some of those things that you look back and like 95, we weren't that far. Like there was some foundation here, and then somehow it seems like there was some wilderness years in between. But
in between 95 and here,
right?
Yeah. Again, I don't take for granted for a second the crowds we get in Seattle, and there is concern perhaps that in 2019 we were averaging whatever we were averaging, I think over 40.
Yeah.
And now we're closer to 30.
Right.
And so that's not the direction you want things to be headed. We're averaging over 30,000 a game. Like,
yeah,
it's there are far more difficult challenges that soccer clubs in America face.
Oh, for sure. So, you look back on, again, going back to that 95 team, there were a handful of players that went on to have pretty impressive careers. I don't think any of them more than Marcus Hahnemann.
Yep.
What was Marcus like as a kid on that team?
He interesting because we had two keepers, Marcus and Dusty Hudak. So Dusty was UW, Marcus was SPU. They both came out the same year, and I don't know if you could have picked who was better. And there was one game where Alan couldn't make a decision on who was going to start, and I'm speaking. This is secondhand. I was not there. Where he asked Dusty who should start. Like he gave him some sort of you or Marcus, and Dusty was like, "Oh, Marcus can start this one," thinking that he's in for the next one.
Right.
And Marcus played great, and
that was the end of
never looked back. Yeah, he played pretty much every game for 3 years, and then he went off to Colorado before he went to England. I actually lost to Marcus in the playoffs in '97. Marcus and Chris Henderson and Sean Henderson were all on Colorado Rapids.
I'm sure you loved that.
Sean's it was a three-legged best of three semifinal. Basically getting us to MLS Cup. So it's conference final.
Yeah.
First game in Dallas, Sean Henderson scores the only goal on a back post header. Second game in Colorado, Chris wins it on a bicycle kick, and Marcus is in goal both games. It was, yeah, I had to accept that. But Marcus, as a young man, he has not aged. Maybe he's aged in a sense he has less hair, but don't we all? He is still a free spirit, fun. He was that way then. He's still with Amanda. His kids are obviously grown now, but he liked trucks. He liked extreme sports. He was big and strong and tough, but again, that playfulness, I smile when I think of Marcus, let alone see him, because there's a twinkle in his eye, and he's mischievous, or he can also be serious, but you have to be if you're going to have a career as a pro. You don't get to just joke your way through the whole experience. But he did. I don't think he'll be mad at me for telling this story. The following year in '96, Alan Hinton was no longer the coach. Neil Megson had taken over as player coach.
Oh,
and
which always goes well.
He ditched the player part about halfway through the season, and our performances improved. I don't know if that's he was better on the sideline or if his presence on the field was a problem. One of the two. But he said, we're going to preseason. We're going to head to Green Lake. We're going to go around Green Lake for some fitness. So we're going to meet at Green Lake. So we all drive our cars independently up to Green Lake. And Marcus shows up with roller skates or the blades, rollerblades.
Very 96. Very appropriate for 96. Yeah. If you put your mind back to 96.
They might even have had like appropriate colors,
right,
like
exactly.
some teal. And, yeah.
Was he wearing, I hope he was wearing like biker shorts or something. But anyway,
we said, Marcus, what are you doing? He goes, well, you didn't say we're going to run around Green Lake. You said we're going to go around Green Lake. So Neil let him ride his skate, and we lapped him. He was on skates, and we lapped him.
Was he good at rollerblading?
He looked. That was maybe a sport he was just learning. So I think he actually worked harder than we did in the skates.
So it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out.
I like the image of Marcus Hahnemann rollerblading around.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. No, he is. He's the one of that team that, we would say made it in the sense of got to Europe, had a long career, World Cup.
It is funny because Marcus has this amazing career that he played. I think he was on 3 World Cup teams, wasn't he? At least 2.
At least 2.
But he also, he's one of the most successful American players. If you just look at his resume, his longevity and his success in Europe measures up with really it measures up with Casey, it measures up with Brad Friedel, it measures up with, yet he doesn't seem to be talked about as much because he didn't start any World Cup games.
Yeah. I think, and I played with Casey and Marcus, and the thing about Casey that, again, he from the age of, the time I met him when he was 18, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. His clear vision in his mind, and he worked every day to make himself better at that. And whereas I don't know if Marcus still knows what he wants to do. He's flying planes.
He's a commercial.
I know.
He's flying passenger. He's doing passenger runs to Canada and stuff.
I think he doesn't have that. He had that single vision when he played, but I don't know if he was as obsessed as Casey was. Casey also went to Europe on an American passport.
Right, which is he was the first player to go on an American passport,
right? That's my understanding.
I know this is a controversial subject because I think him and Tony Miola still argue about this, right?
Well, he's... Yeah.
I was going to wear it.
It's okay. This is Pete Fewing is crashing the interview.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be with you. I love the jersey. Dave Gillett, Chopper.
Yeah.
That's fitting you have Dave Gillett's jersey.
He's my favorite.
Yeah. He did a clinic once, and he smoked a cigarette during the clinic. I'm not kidding.
Bonus content here.
Yeah. I got John Rowland and Pepe Fernandez.
Okay. Yeah. John Rowland's the leading scorer those first 2 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're talking about the 95 Sounders, in case you're curious. You want to add anything about that?
I had a scarf, I think, from that team. That's it. But Wade did kick the bejeebers out of me when he was playing for Portland and I was playing for Seattle.
Yes.
His index finger was this big and he was standing over me and he was cursing.
Did you guys know each other from?
No.
That's when we met.
That's you met.
I knew who Pete was,
I knew who Wade was.
Yeah, but I was an angry young man.
Which is why it's fitting he has Dave Gillett's
No, this is great. This actually is a really good illustration of what I think is what I love about this. I don't know. I do really genuinely. I'm new to this. I came here in 2009. The Sounders were already an MLS team, but it's fascinating to me to see sort of the way that the Sounders' connection to these past iterations it just seems unlike what we see elsewhere, and I love being able to sit here in a press box and have a former, I know Pete wasn't involved in the Sounders, but he was involved in a lot of the stuff that was going on between the two Sounders teams.
Pete Fewing is I think a pivotal figure in the Seattle soccer community. His camp is legendary, but very successful career as a head coach at Seattle University, 2 national titles. A lot of great players that came through that program as well. Alex Roldan will be on the field this evening. I look at him, didn't play in the NASL, a little too young. It just didn't get signed, but he was certainly in that mix of players, the Klein brothers, Pete, same age as Brian, same age as Schmetz. So there was their team, and the Lake City Hawks, which is Brian's team, had Fred Hamill and who signed for the Sounders as a 18-year-old as well, but then wound up going back to school. He's now a professor. I've got to meet him, but also didn't play for the Resurrected Sounders, Pete. Slightly too old. He was his coach at that point. So, but he's one of us. We're all part of that. Danny Jackson was a USL only Sounder. Had a couple bad injuries. Right. We love him. He's one of us. You know, Steve Jenkins, who I never played with, or sorry, Scott Jenkins. Stevie Jenkins was Tom Jenkins' son, passed away sadly. Anyway, but Scott Jenkins, I think, was the all-time appearance leader until maybe Zach Scott broke it. But USO only. Leighton O'Brien. You know, these are guys that are legends in the community. Right. That never might have had a USL Sounder jersey on at one point, but some of them never even had that. It's just the connection is real. And I honestly, I mean, hoping this doesn't sound brown noserish, but Adrian cultivates that. You know, that Kellen Rowe and Zakawani, Evans, Lamar, I think I saw him walking by in the hallway. They're all still around. Right. And now Lamar and Kellen, okay, they're local. But Brad Evans didn't have to retire here. And Steve certainly didn't have to retire here. Yeah. And they stayed because there's just something about the club and its connection with the community, and for crying out loud, summers in Seattle. I mean,
you can do worse. Well, before we end this, I do want to just get a broader sense. I maybe should have brought this up earlier, but 1995 is also sort of Seattle is having a moment. The larger picture. All of a sudden, Seattle goes from being this sleepy little town up in the corner of the country to sort of the cultural epicenter of the in a lot of ways. I mean, it was getting a lot of worldwide attention all of a sudden. I realize that 95 is maybe on the tail end of that, but still, it's. I don't know, what was it like in Seattle in 1995, and did you get a sense of it changing?
Yeah, the early 90s were that. It felt that. I mean, whether it was Microsoft or Starbucks or certainly the music scene and how that, you know, was front page news. Heck, the Mariners refused to lose season. You know, like all of these things are happening in the early 90s. Being in the middle of it, you know, I went to shows in Pioneer Square. I was not early on the Microsoft stock thing like some of my friends were, but that it felt normal. But the vibe of the city was a small town. It felt like there were neighborhoods, and you felt like when you walked Capitol Hill, it felt like Capitol Hill. We lived in the Rainier Valley, my wife and I, during that period. Now I guess it might be called Seward Parkish. But I lived on Orcas Street for, you know, my last 2 seasons in Seattle. It was. It had everything. I mean, maybe people could argue it wasn't like you didn't get fine dining except at Canlis, right? We just sort of had mom and pop restaurants and things like that. Ivers was a big, you know, it was cool to get fish and chips at Ivers, even if they, you know, they're good, but they're probably better fish and chips in the world, right? I don't know. I'm not an aficionado.
We can just get into a whole.
It was dirtier though. It was. I mean, from the viaduct, just a lot. The Kingdom, a lot of those things were still here, and it's maybe appropriate that a lot of the photos of me playing are in black and white. You know, there's not. I swear the world was color back then, but
it is fun explaining that to my kids about that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if it just you got better. I mean, most of the photographs that were taken were for newspapers, so they didn't need to be color. So you know that, but it feels black and white when I think of what Seattle is now, which is a tech city, which is a modern commercial and transportation and even a tourism destination. We have cruise ships coming and going, and back then we had the Princess Marguerite, a little ferry that took you to Victoria, and that was a big deal to get on the Princess Marguerite in your Chevy station wagon. Yeah, things have changed.
Things have changed. Well, Wade, this has been great. I hope people enjoyed this. I am glad that this these early iterations of the Sounders or mid-generation Sounders are getting some shine. And I graduated high school in 1995, so this year is particularly relevant to me. I've kind of gotten really, I don't know, I just had a lot of nostalgia for this particular thing that they're doing. But, thank you so much for doing this.
I hope the jerseys are a hit, and no, I'm not dyeing my hair purple.
Okay, that's a good way to end it. I'm Jeremiah Shan. This is Nouhou Adietes, and we'll catch you next time.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party.
I feel a lot better than Bob.